Well, I'm glad we were able to get together. How did it go last night? Was it last night?
No, it's Tuesday night.
Right. How did it go?
Terrific. We had
the thing on Outbound or something?
Outward Bound.
Yeah.
Alan Grossman. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
It's quite a program.
Welcome very much to Conversations. I'm pleased to welcome to the program Marian Karpen, who is the president and founder of a really interesting organization here in New York City called WorkTalk. And Marian, welcome very much to Conversations.
Thanks, Harold. It's great to be here.
Yeah.
It's great to be able to talk about what's going on in the city.
Yeah, because you've been on to this thing, and we want to talk about it. And I wonder, but why don't we, before we get to WorkTalk itself, and to some of the things you've been doing with, that come off this downsizing and so forth that's going on, maybe share, if you would, your own background a little bit, if you would, for the audience.
Okay. I've gone through several career changes. When I first got out of college, and I graduated from Vassar with a degree in French, math, and psych, I wanted to go into advertising in the worst way. And they said to me, oh, with your credentials, if you're only a man. I ended up with Women's Wear Daily. 2 years later, I was promoted to the Paris fashion editor. And it was so exciting to be able to cover all the jet setters and the fashion designers and go all over Europe. I went to the wedding in Scorpios, and I coined the name Jackie O for Jackie Onassis. And I did a nationally syndicated newspaper column, and then I decided to go to Wall Street.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and you had been in that sort of fast fashion track, right? A lot of exciting good times.
Absolutely.
Huh? Yeah, right, okay. But then you went to Wall Street in what capacity?
I started out as a lowly trainee. I don't think there's anyone lower than a trainee. And within 5 years, I was a vice president and a principal in a firm.
Within at a Wall Street firm,
major Wall Street firm.
Wasn't that a big change or not? Was that a big change from the magazine publisher, from that to Wall Street?
Yes,
big change.
Huge change.
What caused the change? Was it your volition or what happened? Did you get it?
Totally. Something that I wanted to do. I wanted something different, challenging. And I'd already done it with women's wear and with the jet set and the glamorous people and interviewing all the stars and celebrities and authors and artists. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was good in its time, but it was time to get on something a little more substantial. And was that something that you had training for that sort of thing?
I had no training.
You had to train on the job, as it were. And you learned, right?
I sure did.
Did you have to take any knocks, being if it were female?
Sure. I was the first woman they'd hired in 13 years.
Really?
Yes.
Is it a major house?
Oh, yes.
You don't want to mention it. I don't know if you do.
It's no longer in existence. Blythe Eastman Dillon. It was acquired by Payne Weber.
Yeah, I see. Right. Yeah.
So yes, and then there were 26 in our class. There was one other woman from Pasadena, and I was elected president of the class, which was spokesman. Then nobody really knew what to do with me.
Yeah. Right.
But it was a fabulous, fabulous experience. It was exciting. It was the heady days of Wall Street, and I was...
The 80s then, was that?
In the 80s,
yeah, roaring 80s, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a heavy... So those are two major big things. And were you out of Boston, did I hear you say? Or
near Boston, Worcester.
Near Boston, right?
Right.
Yeah. But, and you majored in the humanities at Vassar, right?
Yes.
So you had that. So you had all this background. And then you began to, because WorkTalk itself, so I mean, that's essential. Those are the major aspects of your career path, I guess. All right.
Oh, yes.
What else?
I started a company dealing with Eastern Europe, and I incorporated in Warsaw. And I had a big conference here at the Waldorf. And of course, at the time, I was not propitious. The Gulf War was going on.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Warsaw, one of 2 Americans in Warsaw at the time. It was exciting, it was wonderful, but the Americans were not going over there.
Yeah, right.
So I went back to Wall Street for a brief time, and I started WorkTalk. And it started literally as a fluke.
Wait a minute. You had gone from the... Were you still working at the Wall Street thing, or when you were doing the thing in Warsaw, or had you left that and gone and started on your own entrepreneurially?
Yes, yes.
That was another venture for you.
Absolutely.
The others had been corporate, right?
Absolutely.
And you tried an entrepreneurial venture on your own. Well, that didn't work.
Right.
As it happened. Most don't, I guess, right. And so you came back, and let me get the year straight. When would that have been? There were 4 years. 1992.
I left Wall Street in 1990.
1990. So you gave a couple years to this thing that you tried, this entrepreneurial thing.
And I went back briefly to Wall Street.
You went back to the same firm?
No,
different firm.
A small firm, a different firm in a different area.
Did you find you were able to trade on the values that you had learned and the education you had learned in order to get a position when you went back to Wall Street? Or what did you find when you tried to go back to Wall Street having left it?
But it was a situation that I didn't feel was working out. So, and I had started WorkTalk in the spring of 1992, shortly after joining this firm.
No, okay. Now we're bringing it up to things that specifically we wanted to talk to you about. It's an interesting background, and you'd covered a whole lot of bases, and you'd learned a lot about the way the world works.
Oh, yes.
Both from the corporate
indeed.
and the entrepreneurial and that sort of thing,
Yes.
and the humanities
And
as well.
internationally.
And internationally as well. You'd done that kind of thing, so you'd really, hit a home run going around all these kind of things. And you come back, and you started a thing called Work Talk. Now, that might be a good time for us to talk about Work Talk. What is Work Talk? When did you start it? Why did you start it? What was involved? And let's share that, if you could, with the audience.
Sure. I started Work Talk in the spring of 1992. And how did I start it and why? In my church, one day after Sunday Mass, I went down for the coffee hour. And people were standing around saying how difficult it was to get work. One woman had lost her business, was evicted from her apartment, would have been on the street if a parishioner hadn't taken her in. Another one, extremely talented, attractive, bright, couldn't find work. Others said that they had gone to some workshops around town and how depressing they were. So I went to the pastor and I asked him if we could do something. He said, sure, organize it. Well, we had no budget.
Yeah.
We met. I coined the name Work Talk, and I registered it as a trademark. And the thinking at one point was, well, it's summer, it's springtime, summer. Why not wait till the fall? We don't have any money. There's no organization.
Now, who is the we? Is it
the
you?
pastor and another member of the finance committee.
So you were doing that, the finance committee of the church?
Yes.
Yeah, I see. So this was done in the church.
Right.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And I said, wait, I'll go to some of these workshops.
Right.
I'll see what they're like and see what's going on out there.
Right.
And I did. And I said, we have to do this now. There's too much pain.
Now, what do you mean? What workshops? There were workshops
There were, at the time, there were some workshops at various churches. For example, St. Bart's had one. Trinity had one. Our Lady of Victory on Wall Street had one. The Mid-Manhattan Library had one. They were all run by one person who was a retired advertising executive from the Wall Street Journal. And I give him a lot of credit for doing it. He used to come up from Pennsylvania to do these, but he took sick and they stopped a couple of years ago.
All right. Now, was it then? Now, let's just take pause here for a moment because we're moving pretty fast here. Here we have an economy that's been developing. The United States has been developing, and people come and go. Entrepreneurial developments happen. Big companies develop. There's ups and downs. We had the Depression in 1929. We had all kinds of things that were going on and so forth. But did you sense then that there was something going on that was, in a certain sense, out of phase with the way our development of our society had? And the idea was that you were, in a certain sense, precursor, if I might say that, to this incredible interest that has grown now, and then just found a tremendous amount of ink and interest and so forth in this series that the New York Times just read on downsizing, that there's something structurally going on in our economy, and that there was pain and human suffering coming out of that in a unique and special way, and these groups were the result of that, and Work Talk was addressing that issue?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Because what I saw happening was talented people not being able to find jobs. Talented, experienced, they have everything going for them.
PhDs,
Oh,
engineers.
PhDs, sure.
Yeah.
Try even doctors,
Yeah.
MDs.
Yeah. Really?
Yes.
Really?
Oh, yes. I've had them come to
No
Work
kidding.
Talk.
Yeah.
MBAs from Ivy League schools.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing. You should see the credentials.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
And this was, okay.
And what happened was, the first night, the pastor wouldn't let me do it until I had 3 speakers lined up. And I said, where am I going to get 3 speakers? So, networking.
Yeah.
I ended up with 4. He said you could do it with no budget, shoestring. I created a little flyers like this.
Yeah,
and
so you could just run this off on the mimeograph or something, right?
Absolutely.
Like we used to do. Yeah.
And I ran around to the Upper East Side, putting them under the doors of rectories and churches and synagogues and whatever I could that was a community center that would reach people.
Yeah.
And the first night, we had 70 people.
Now, okay, now what, and you coined this was 4 years ago, and you called it Work Talk, and it was a certain sense a place for people to come together and talk about this thing that was going on,
Yes,
right? Right.
Absolutely.
Good for you.
And with known and notable guest speakers each and every week, people like Barbara Scher, for example, who wrote the book Wishcraft.
Yeah.
And I could do anything if only I knew what it was. We've had Emily Colt now, who wrote Congratulations, You've Been Fired. We've had some wonderful people. And they give of themselves each and every week. There is no payment at all to any of the speakers.
Okay.
They donate their time, their talent, their expertise. They care to share.
Yeah, all right.
And that's the philosophy of Work Talk. We're there for each other.
Yeah.
We're there for ourselves. We're part of community. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
As I tell the people at WorkTalk each week, we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
Different seats.
Yeah.
We're in this together. And there's a tremendous amount of pain. When I see qualified people, 35 years old, can't get a job, why? There's something radically wrong out there.
All right, this, if I may, let me move a little slower here, if I can, and everything like that. These insecurities of these people who are, that you tick them off, engineers, doctors, this sort of thing, people who would have, in the normal course of event, been in what we call our middle or upper middle class thing. They've met all the criteria of what's supposed to make for a successful life and so forth. Do you think it is that they are, and it's becoming politically relevant now, it's beginning to become politically relevant, but because it is beginning to touch them, but are they suffering the kinds of insecurities and dislocations and so forth that has been perhaps, or I wonder if you find, has been the lot, as it were, of a great number of the people at the lower end of the social economic scale over the long haul, and it's just that these are qualified people who have gone through all of the rites of passage and so forth you're supposed to do to become successful? Is it different, or is it something similar to that that is being introduced because people at the lower end have been feeling these kind of pressures and insecurities from the get-go?
That's true. At the lower end they have, but they were used to having jobs either by the hour or for a shorter term. We're looking at qualified people who paid their dues. They went to school, took the right courses, they did the right things at work, and suddenly they're out. That's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem I see where you are sacrificing everything for the bottom line. The bottom line has become the top line. And that's where I have a real problem. I look at some of these companies, for example, IBM, 15 years ago in their employee handbook, said in black and white, IBM is the place to work because we never lay off anybody. And that's why people want to work for us, and even when times are lean, we don't lay off. Well, then, 15 years ago, they had 405,000 workers. Today, they have 225,000. Big difference. They lay off.
Yeah.
How about the insecurity that's fostered? People don't know how to cope. That's why they need support groups out there. WorkTalk gets people from the tri-state area. I even had a CEO in the audience once from a company in Georgia. And how did I know? He ended up offering the speaker a consultant's job. So you don't know who's in that audience.
Do you get people from the lower social economic scale?
Yes, absolutely.
And do they have a different experience?
No.
Or do they have a different... do you understand what I'm getting at with this problem? Is that there are some people who are from the lower social economic status will say, well, these folks are just getting what we've had all along. And they might look at that with a certain thing. Well, we've been suffering that kind of nonsense for a long time, and now it's getting up into the middle class. So now people are taking interest. But Lord, it's been there for a long time, and it's on and then there's also the question on a world scale. You know, I'm talking in terms of sociologically, whether or not, or you know.
I know exactly what you're saying, but on the lower end, technology has come in. Look what technology has done to displace workers. Bookkeepers, we don't need them. We have machines. We have computer software to do it.
They have. It's not only at the lower end. I think they have certain processes. If I may, Marian, this is a conversation. They have certain processes where, in neurosurgery, they do not trust the surgeon. They have robotically done systems which can cut and to go with much finer tolerances next to nerve cells, and that the robots can do it. They have a machine in Israel that can pick melons. It goes down the line of the melons, and it knows when the melon is ripe to be picked. And the way that it knows if the melon is ripe is sensed olfactorily. It's by aroma. And then it picks the ones that are ready to be picked. And you don't need people. The technology is displacing them not only at the assembly line, sense of turning the nut, but throughout the economy. Is that something that you find in your research?
Absolutely. Okay. This is an age of information and technology.
Yes.
How about walking into an office and saying seeing, oh, where's the secretary? Where's the receptionist? Well, you have voicemail to answer the calls coming in. You have the secretary is now Miss IBM or Mr. Compaq or Mr. Packard Bell. Here's your secretary. It's got a screen and it's got a program. Use it. They might have one secretary for maybe 5, whereas all those 5 used to have their own.
Yes, that's right.
So again, look what's happening. It's all over the lot. No one is immune. Peter Drucker has called this change the second industrial revolution. And I agree with him.
Right, yeah. Alvin Toffler also would talk about that, and others have. They're beginning to address it, but don't some of those, Peter Drucker is a very optimistic fellow.
Yes.
And so, by and large, is Alvin Toffler, and so is Mr. Newt Gingrich, and so is George Gilder, and so are a number of other people, particularly people, more conservative people, it seems to be, who are very optimistic, and they're just, and they will say that it's always been like that. Technology displaces the buggy whip makers, and then they go into the automobile factories, and there will be jobs, always more and more jobs created. And they point to the fact that unemployment is low, and they point to all these figures. You understand, you've seen this, you follow it carefully. And there are many people who are very, very positive that, you know, the technological system. Schumpeter used to write about how the technology will do that, and it'll displace people, but new things will develop. You think there's something new and askew in this world that is not held with the historical pattern? And you've been looking at it in depth for these 4 years. Yeah.
It's speed at which these changes are happening. It's the speed, the rapidity of it all. People can't even cope with it happening so fast. It's mind-boggling what's going on. You buy a computer today, it's obsolete tomorrow. Yeah. And also, if you look at numbers, to be very honest, they don't count in those statistics the underemployed or the part-timers. What about those whose unemployment has run out? And they're desperate, and they take any part-time job, anything, just to put food on the table. They're not counted in those statistics. Technically, are they employed? Maybe. Are they underemployed? Yes.
Yes.
Are they misemployed? Definitely.
Do you think the fact, you know, a lot of the people are complaining, we're in a political year, right? And a lot of people are complaining what the economy's grew at about 2.1% or something. It's grown at such a low rate. If it had grown at 3%, we'd probably have the deficit taken care of and everything else. There's been such a slow rate in the growth of the economy. Some people have said the reason that it is growing so slowly, they try to understand it, one of the reasons is there isn't the consumer purchasing power in the society needed to buy that which we're fully technologically capable of producing, but people just haven't got the purchasing power to buy that which is able to be made. So it's not a supply side, it's a demand side problem. That's because people are becoming poorer and don't have the means to do it. And isn't that an end game situation in a sense? You got to have customers to buy what all those machines can make, or can you address that?
Yes, because if you look at credit card debt, it's maxed out. So how can people, if they don't have the job security, and there is no job security in any profession anywhere, if you don't have the job security and your credit card is maxed out, I don't think you're going to be buying. Certainly not a lot. Look at the popularity of catalog sales, especially those that have quality merchandise at a price. Look at the Walmarts of this world. And look what they've done. It's
what have
price.
they done?
It's price.
The Walmart is the big superstore.
Yes.
And they're doing very well, as I understand.
Well,
right?
they had one down quarter.
Yeah, but on the whole, they're doing well, and that's a sign that there is, like, retailing is becoming a great big. And the economy is becoming a matter of very large entities that are very efficient, or something of that sort. Is that a general tendency you see?
Absolutely, because take a look at the banking sector. That's a perfect example. Yeah. The banking sector has had more and more and more mergers. In fact, I have seen some statistics that say, in the next 5 years, 80% of the banking jobs will disappear. What's replacing?
Over the time ahead from now. We're talking early 96.
That's right.
Yeah.
In the Midwest, there are some banks that will encourage you to use the machine, because if you use a teller, $3, please. Yeah. They'll throw on all kinds of service charges. Look at the banks around here that have been gobbled up. The Chase Chemical is only the latest. Yeah.
12,000 were laid off there.
Well, I'm hearing the number is closer to 20 when it's said and done. You've also got banks like Fleet, which gobbled up NatWest. NatWest has 400 branches. That deal is supposed to be consummated May 1st. Wells Fargo bought First Interstate in California. It's estimated they will lay off 8,000 out there. And to give you an idea of some of the greed and excess, they paid a bank in Minneapolis, which was in the process of putting out a hostile bid. Actually, they did. They paid him $200 million to walk away. That's not a bad day's pay.
I see. Yeah.
They may have, maybe let's say they had $10 million in legal fees. That's not bad for about 3 months worth of work.
Amen. Yeah.
And $190 million?
Yeah. And at the same time, I know one of the other things that they're all factoring in, one of the other things is that since 1973, everyone talks about it for reasons, you know, it used to be that productivity would go up, you know, technology and other things, and then the wages all track productivity for everybody. And now, since 1973, we went off the gold standard and other kinds of things. But since 1973, those things have they've leveled off and they're even coming down. And the profits are going way up. And then one other thing, in a certain sense, rubbing almost salt in the wound, as it were, of people, is that the top executives have taken just pay. I mean, apart from stock options, just pay and so forth, they've taken pay increases that are seen by increasing numbers of people as totally unconscionable. I mean, to where they used to get 30 to 1, according to what the chief executive officer and the regular worker would get. It's now up close to 150 to 1, 250 to 1.
Right.
Whereas Japan and Western Europe have more or less stayed around 30 or 40. 20. Okay. Cher, you
yes,
understand.
It's 20 to 1 in Japan.
20 to 1 in Japan for the top.
For the top.
And
250 times the average worker's pay, the CEO in this country is compensated.
It really has gone that far out of kilter.
You bet.
I mean, are those average figures or just certain examples of
average.
Craziness,
average.
Right?
Average.
So isn't that something that's rubbing salt in the wound?
You also have stock options.
Yeah.
Look at the head of AT&T. You know the joke.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know the joke. It's AT&T stands for Allen and 2 temps. Because everyone else is going to get fired.
Oh, I hadn't heard that one yet. I hadn't heard that yet. Right.
And I'm hearing numbers that absolutely are mind-boggling. There was a big ad campaign recently in 29 papers across the country talking about their workers and asking for job leads and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It backfired. The whole idea was to say, gee, we care.
Yeah.
You know what the workers said? Why didn't they take that money and maybe save some jobs instead of doing stuff like that, which is positive PR? Then, a few days ago, the number came down to 18,000. That's all they were going to lay off? I don't think so. They've targeted at least 100,000 who have been asked to write their resumes and are undergoing performance reviews. So if they're not nervous, I don't know who is.
Well, what about the possibility of, you have these small business, you have these large businesses, they're doing that, and the technology seems to be able to come in most effectively in terms of getting rid of people working at the large scale. What about the fact that we might be able to have great numbers of entrepreneurial possibilities, even mom and pop things, or cable television and other kinds of information technology? Everybody will become a publisher on the internet, or that there's, and and the people who will talk about the wonders of the information environment, and that there's going to be all kinds of opportunities for high-wage, high-paying, high-skilled jobs, and Mr. Clinton will encourage everyone to go to school and learn and so forth. And that's the rhetoric of the people who are much of our political leadership now.
That's nice.
What about that?
I'm not sure some of the political leadership has got the solutions to this. I haven't seen anything really work. I haven't seen a lot of these government programs that great. Look at your unemployment in the South Bronx. Look at it in Harlem among black males.
You're looking at the worst. Those are the worst case scenarios.
Granted.
Yeah, right. And the unemployment rate generally, the figures will show that the unemployment rate is generally low here in the United States relative to Europe and other places. It was 5.5.
Well, that's again.
It's not like what it was.
Can't believe these numbers because they're not including a lot of what they should include. If they included those that have stopped looking, that have gotten discouraged, that's 1 to 2 million. The 6 to 7 million part-timers, they don't include those.
Well, they haven't included those for a long time. So
that's right.
Yeah, but they haven't included those for a long time, so the statistics stay consistent over a long period of time.
But they're not representative of reality.
No, they're not. And there is a reality of angst, the free-floating angst that is in that society that you touched into with WorkTalk, that is there and was highlighted in this series and is beginning to be heard. It was interesting, Mr. Dole is going to be our candidate on the Republican ticket, actually sort of discovered in New Hampshire when Mr. Buchanan, who was a little bit, out of the, off to the side, normal candidate, he said, oh, there seem to be economic problems with some folks, as though it was some sort of a surprise to him.
If Buchanan hadn't brought it up, I don't think anybody would have paid a whole lot of attention.
And now Buchanan's out of the picture. He'll probably, will the issue go away? You think the issue is going to go away?
Go away.
The issue cannot go away.
And if you listen to Charles Handy, for example, he was asked recently, when will this American obsession with cost-cutting stop? And Handy is a guru.
Who is Mr. Handy?
Charles Handy is a British management strategist, consultant. I think he's a brilliant prognosticator of things to come. His book, The Age of Unreason, which was written in the 80s, late 80s, not only was a hit, but he predicted that by the end of this decade, the year 2000, at least half to two-thirds of the workforce will be entrepreneurial. That entrepreneurial mindset is already creeping into corporations. For example, MetLife. They brought in some people from the Entrepreneurial Center to train their people in that entrepreneurial, more creative mindset. Yeah. Which I think is interesting. Yeah. Also, Naisbitt, in his book, Megatrends 2000, that's been around a long time.
Right, yeah. He's very optimistic all the time.
Yeah.
Well, then so maybe that's the solution. Everyone's going to become an entrepreneur.
Maybe, but not everybody can.
Well,
I see at WorkTalk, for example, thousands of people have come to WorkTalk since its inception.
And we should say, we haven't. I don't think we have. This is a series. Every Tuesday night, you meet.
Every single Tuesday.
These people meet.
It's 76th between
76th.
Lexington and 3rd. And we meet in the hall underneath the Church of Saint Jean Baptiste.
Yes.
And it's open to everyone.
Right.
We're a charity.
Yeah, right.
Nobody gets paid.
Right.
We're all volunteers.
Right, right.
And people have said to me, "Oh, you're crazy." Yeah, you bet I'm crazy. And I'll be that crazy because I care.
Okay, and you address, among other things, these issues. And then you also talk to one another and everything, support one another and that kind of thing. Yeah.
We have 8 tables of literature. We have loads of bulletin boards with job postings, with information that people can take advantage of that doesn't have a dollar sign in front of it. Not everyone can afford
Good for you,
30 or 40 bucks a pop.
Yeah,
they
right.
can't.
Yeah, I
in
understand,
times like this, the average American, I've heard, is 90 days away from bankruptcy.
Yeah, yeah, and those are the people that are well placed.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention. But take up again, if you could, this idea of the entrepreneurial spirit. Maybe the reason that these people are having so much trouble is because they haven't equipped themselves to live in the modern world where you've got to go out and hustle. And if you've still got that work ethic and you've still got that hustle, you will find your way if you persevere through, and we're just going to build some true grit into the American people, and they've been too soft and they've been too coddled, and they've got to get out there and really do it, and then they'll pull it off, and by gosh, it'll be a happy ending at the end with the flag waving.
But look what happened and what built this country. It was mom and pop operations. It was small towns. It was small operations that grew and grew and grew. 100 years ago, there was no Ford Motor Company. Not as we know it.
No.
There wasn't the General Motors. There weren't these huge banks.
So you're agreeing with me?
Yes.
That the solution might be that if we get the entrepreneurial spirit, and that we're going to be able to meet the economic problems that exist that you're spelling out, and it'll be a matter of America becoming more entrepreneurial and competitive and so forth.
They have to.
So you're ultimately optimistic about things.
And also, where's the growth coming from? It's not these big companies.
Not employment.
No, within the next 4 or 5 years, you're going to see the companies with 200 or less workers will employ 80% of the workforce. 80%.
I'm sorry, could you give that again to me, please?
Within the next 4 years, you will see 80% of the workforce working in companies that are 200 or fewer employees.
Right. Well, it's been like that for quite a while.
That's right.
It's moving in that direction.
And this is where it's going. Also, what's going is changing the way we work. 75 million Americans do not work the traditional Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job. They don't. So we're talking of flex time. We're talking of the portable employee, where maybe you do 2 or 3 things at once. One of my speakers last November said, he called it whinging. It's a British term.
Whinging?
Whinging. You're doing 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different things. You might be writing, you might be speaking, you might be doing a book, you might be doing some articles, you might be doing consulting. Now, what does this mean? Well, one person won't be able to fire you. It'll take 5 or 6 at least. It's giving you flexibility, but it's non-traditional thinking. That's the difference.
And what you're encouraging, do you then have an encouraging attitude towards something there at WorkTalk? And would you then encourage at WorkTalk the idea of everybody developing and becoming like an entrepreneur?
We encourage people to look within. That's where the security lies, to find out what their assets are. Their assets are their skills. Always keep honing their skills, keep taking classes, keep up to date on the technologies, because that's where the security is. And doing their research. Again, that's relying on their strengths. The corporation used to be Mama and Papa Bear. The corporation used to take care of you. Guess what? They're not doing it anymore. Therefore, we have to rely on our network outside the organization. We have to grow that network, always. People who are employed are always looking for a job.
They have the figures on the employment. They say the employment level is low. You know, they're relatively low compared to what it was. You know, in the past. Well, underemployed is another thing. But they say that people are employed. But they do say, at least they stress or they give figures that the jobs that people have accepted, very often the wage levels are so low that there's a group of people who are fully employed and they're still at a poverty level. And there are places where it used to take one person to work, now it takes two, and they still can't keep up. And that the wages in many of those entrepreneurial activities, no benefits, no health benefits, anything like that, that it's, you know, and there's competitive bidding for them and that ultimately they're selling it to the big companies where, you know, the money is and that sort of thing. So that I've seen some people who say that entrepreneurial route of hard work and grit and everything isn't going to be such a happy outcome either, if you understand what I'm saying.
But we have to learn how to do it. We have to learn to adjust and to adapt to this new way of thinking. It's not the traditional, where you have the old-fashioned job and you have a job for life. You don't have that anymore. That was sort of an unwritten contract. But today, there's a new employee-employer contract. That is, what value do you bring to the table? If you read the book Job Shift by William Bridges, he's a psychologist out of California.
Job Shift, okay.
We are all contingent workers. We're all contract workers.
We're all contingent workers, all right?
We are a vendor of our own skills, to put it very bluntly. AT&T said, oh, we're not firing people. They will just be unassigned.
Let's just make sure it might. Okay, yeah.
And if they're unassigned, that means they're not going to have a desk. It's a new way of thinking. IBM, their facility in Cranford, New Jersey, no one has an office. How about that? You go in to this place that looks like a warehouse. You go along corridors that look like mazes because the walls don't go up to the ceiling.
Right.
They encourage people to go out to the clients. This is a client-driven business,
a
service-driven business now, not any other way. It is serving the client and the client needs. So that you're dealing with an entity like this Cranford operation for IBM that's radically different. Also, promotions. We're now looking at a 360-degree evaluation. You're evaluated by your peers, by your subordinates, by your superiors. New way of thinking. We have to think new ways. We have to be creative if we're going to survive.
If we're going to survive, and the word is survival, and it's anxiety.
Yes,
is certainly there in the wind, and it's something that is very difficult to do. And then that's also done within a global marketplace. And the workers here, if they are, I mean, for the entrepreneurial development, you know, there was a place called Microsoft that got very big. It started in a garage, and Apple and other kinds of things, they get big and that kind of thing, and then they start, and they're going globally, and that there are a lot of the software is being written in Bangalore now and that sort of thing. So we live in a global market economy where entrepreneurials, people who are going to take advantage just as much as an entrepreneur can take advantage of the people who work under him just as well, and maybe even worse than a larger company can. It can be what they call sweatshops and that sort of thing, and that they're going to be in competition with people of what we used to call the third world, or the other developing world, where there's a tremendous pool of people who are willing to work for 10 cents an hour or something like that. So that's part of the pattern, which makes it. Does that make it a little bit more difficult for the entrepreneur to keep up a middle class or upper middle class standard of living with vacations in the Hamptons?
You've got technologies that are enabling them to reach these global markets and see what the global needs are. You've got internet, and people are using that increasingly to advertise their products.
Not many are making money yet.
Nobody's making money, with the exception of those that create the websites. But you also got to look at where there is job formation. For example, here in New York, we have what they call Silicon Alley. From 23rd Street down all the way to the end, to the river. You have a lot of young upstart companies.
23rd Street downtown,
all the way down,
on downtown, right?
At 55 Broad Street, the former home of Drexel Burnham Lambert. The building has been rechristened the New York Information and Technology Center. And there are a lot of upstart companies in there. And
CD-ROMs and things like that?
Well, more than that. Interactive media.
Interactive media,
this
right.
This is hot stuff.
Yeah.
They're saying that that particular area will create 100,000 new jobs.
Where's the market going to be for those things that they create?
The market will be some companies, it can be universities, it can be anybody, it can be even individual people. Depends on what kind of things that they do. 5 of the top 6 record companies are based here in New York. The Grammys are coming here to New York next year. These companies are hot into this interactive media.
Yeah.
And they're really the driving force behind it because they have the bucks. To put it bluntly, it's money.
Yeah.
And they
Well,
see,
I suppose in the economy it always has been.
yes, but I don't think to the excesses that it is now. When you look at some of these companies and what the chairmen are getting and CEOs for salaries, I happen to commend the head of L'Oreal, who engineered the takeover by Lockheed.
Yeah.
He got $36 million for doing it. And he said 1 week they weren't going to downsize, the next week, oh yes, we're going to downsize. But he's sharing half of that, or $18 million, with those downsized workers. I'm sure he's not going to miss the money.
Or there was a gentleman who had his factory burned down. He kept the workers
Yes.
on. Yeah, and he was. But that's sort of the exception that proves the rule.
All
I'm
right,
afraid.
maybe
You know, that sort of thing.
we need some examples like that to drive home.
What? Okay, I
Some
wonder.
standards.
I wonder if we have something new and different going on, and we've been evolving for 200,000 years since first we emerged out of Africa as a species, and we've had a long, slow process of building up. And my Lord, 1912. We didn't even have, let's see, we didn't even have the airplane. We only hardly had electricity. You know, these things are developing so fast. Now these things come, every day you pick up the newspaper, it's another technological revolution, and it's going, the shape isn't even hyperbolic anymore. It goes like this, it's L-shaped. And there's something, and we said, much of it is the technological displacement of human beings in the productive process. They have these expert systems. They have other kinds of systems where the technology can, in fact, replace the human activity in the economic process. I mean, if they can do that, that melon picking machine can take the place of somebody bending over and picking the melon.
Fine, but at what point do
and
we...
is it Aristotle, if I could say, in the politics at one point said, you know, Aristotle, they had the civilization of Athens they had the citizens, and they lived very well, and there were higher order of things that they were called for, you know, philosophy and some things that they were to be concerned with, but the higher order for the citizens who participated was predicated on a slave society. They had a slave society. And it was said that they had to have the slave society in order for these people to live at a higher order. And Aristotle said that so that it would have to be until the loom learned to weave for itself. If the loom learned to weave so that the tasks of the economy could be taken over by technology, then it might be that you could have a liberated society rather than one of based on a slave class. There's some people who've seen these and you've got these technology which is actually responsible for the production, increasingly, robots. And you've got a very small percentage of people who own the robots, and they get these stock options that they own the robots that make the actual production. The labor contribution to it is less and less. You don't think there's anything that might be said for the fact that instead of concentrating and trying to everybody scramble like ants to try and find another market, and then to every little nook and cranny of human activity, every emotion, to turn it into a money-making entrepreneurial thing where you can exploit human emotions and all kinds of things, you know, to try and make money. Everybody's trying to make money after it. You don't think there's anything to be said maybe for beginning to spread some ownership of the technology and let the technology go and produce the stuff and create some sort of an alternative way for people to get money other than just through jobs? Or is there anything, is that part of the dialogue? Possibly, because the technology seems to be wanting to displace people from the productive process. Maybe they should be with an alternative system of having income so that they could be free for things like, you know, love, caring, music, leisure, relaxation, and some of those things that are of the higher order, which might be of a liberating order, rather than turning the whole of the human society into one gigantic ant farm.
No, we've got to look at values. We are human beings.
Yes.
Not just human doings.
All right, good.
There used to be a department called personnel at most companies.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's human resources. We're a resource, like a commodity. What do you do with a resource? You take it, you use it up, and you throw it out.
I know, dear,
But
I
we're
know.
people.
I know.
And we're people first. And I do think that a lot of these organizations have social responsibility.
Yeah.
Responsibility to the family of mankind, of man, not the worshiping at the altar of greed.
Amen. Amen. I'm in complete agreement with you.
And they've gone overboard.
And I'm completely in agreement with you. And there was the statement by the Pope saying that man is not a commodity, labor is not a commodity, and the ILO said
and the dignity of work.
And and also the ILO took a position that they said that early on in their formation, International Labor Organization made the point: labor is, labor is not a commodity. But it has become a commodity, and I guess in a certain sense that's what I was trying to say with you there, is that the labor, the turning everything into, justifying people having income by their labor or by their work, whether it's entrepreneurial or within a big company or whatever. I'm wondering if maybe nature or something isn't trying to tell us that we're going down the wrong course and that we're fighting the wrong thing in trying to turn everything, every human emotion, every action, with this entrepreneurial scurrying about and so forth, everything into a commodity, including ourselves.
And
if we're not going the wrong way with that, and we should have a large philosophical tete-a-tete or something, that there's something going on that the traditional patterns don't answer.
Right. What about the values of society? What made this nation great was its values. Yes, they had small businesses, small enterprises that grew to larger ones, but they still had values. The family still counted. The family was still a central unit. Look at what's happened to the family today.
Yeah.
The divorce rate, the fractured families, whatever you want to call them. Also, what I'm seeing happen in the workplace is a spiritual element come in. The World Bank in Washington, I don't know those of you who are familiar with it, but it's a rather conservative, stiff organization. Well, a couple of years ago, one of the vice presidents, I believe, decided, gee, let's do something more. Let's have a discussion group and talk about values and ethics and leadership. And it started, and pretty soon it grew to a couple of hundred people. Then it was 300. They had a conference last, I believe it was October, talking about those very things. The first year they were asked to sponsor it, the World Bank said, oh no, but if you want to do it, you can do it. He kept on, and he was persistent. And they did it, and it was standing room only. My point is I'm seeing more and more of this turning towards the intangible, for the spiritual side, because it's the material that is not satisfying.
Yeah, but
in the 80s, it was he who dies with the most toys wins.
Yeah.
They found out that you don't take the toys with you. There's got to be something else.
Well, you can't, no, not only that, but you can't get the toys anymore. People can't get the toys, and so, but there are some people at the top who are. There are a few people who are doing very, very well. And you have this, it's becoming in a certain sense like a feudal system almost, where you have feudal castles, and they have more and more of these communities where there's some people doing very well, and then they will exhort everybody else, and they'll just say, well, if you only tried harder, you're not trying hard enough.
But I'm also...
You're not learning the right skills. Go to school for another 15 years. Do something a little bit more, and then you too can, I mean, I'm just saying, it seems to me there's something in that job ethic. You made a distinction, if I may, and this is just conversation, and Lord knows, work talk, we're just examining these things because we're all in this boat together trying to understand what in the world's going on. But, I mean, I think there's a distinction between job, where you get money for what you do, and work, where you're doing something that you want to do. Isn't there somewhere in the human equation for somebody doing something that they want to do? You're doing a great deal voluntarily.
Totally.
This Access Cable Studio is not monetarily motivated. In fact, it assiduously avoids that. There are some things that are beginning to show up in the human society which are not market-oriented, specifically not market-oriented, trying to stay away from market values. But I hear you saying that the hope of the future, I thought I heard you saying, is that everybody's going to become market-oriented entrepreneurs and make a buck, turn everything into a buck.
I'm not saying all will be entrepreneurs, but I'm saying that we are reassessing our values, a lot of us. The idea of work, if you look at the British definition, it's earning a living. And so many of us, work is who we are. I'm a vice president, or I'm a president.
Well, people get their identity from that.
Yes,
that's important.
It's important, but that's not who they really are. Who they really are is here.
Yeah.
And that's where it's at. And this, more and more people are getting more in touch with that. I see it at WorkTalk. I see it in the speakers and what they're talking about. Your values, your value system. This is the time of the new 3 R's. Re-examining your values, reprioritizing them, refocusing on what you want out of your life, the meaning of life. There's an awakening that is on the spiritual side. There's no 2 ways about it.
It's on the spiritual side, but the problems that you're talking about, the downsizing and all of that sort of thing, and the insecurity and the angst that exists within the society, and the stressing in that article that we just, that they gave so much ink to in the Times and all this talk, is the fact that there is material insecurity.
Yes.
And that's the problem at all these levels. And
because
you know, we need maybe we need some sort of a new economic, I mean, the wealth. I mean, we talk about income distribution, if we could, where you were saying these incredible differences in income. Income is one thing. Wealth is another. That is to own the capital assets that make the production. And we haven't talked yet about the agglomeration of larger and larger companies in terms of the value of what is being produced, not in terms of jobs, but in terms of the value that's produced. And the wealth, the ownership of the capital instruments or the capital assets of the corporation are held by very, very few people.
Right.
And the technology is responsible for the production. So the people, it's the technology that's responsible for the production, not human labor. The human labor may be being put out of the picture, and maybe the point I'm trying to make, maybe it should be put out of the economic picture.
But then what happens to the fabric of society?
Well, then you have to have it. Well, one thing you'd have to do, you have an alternate way for them to have income, so that they can have the things of a mass-produced society. Then you'd have to have a whole lot of number of things of the human spirit, where it could find, where it could find venues for expressions of the human spirit, which are not. The thing that worries me is to turn everything into a commodity process, because people are so desperate for the material needs of the immediate thing, that you're going to undercut this quest for these spiritual values that the technology may liberating us to be concerned with on a large scale for the first time in the history of a long wage slave history situation that most people. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
These are radical changes.
These are radical changes and call for philosophical
Absolutely.
dialogue.
You can read Tom Peters' book, Crazy Times Call for Crazy Organizations. He's another management guru. And I think he's right. We've got to start in terms of thinking more creatively and thinking of things that we can do. We gave the VCR to Japan because we didn't want to make it in this country. We invented it, but we didn't want to make it. We've got to start looking at what society needs and what we can do about it. What are the ills and how can we fix them? So many of us were programmed to go to school, get a degree, that was it. Now it's lifelong learning, totally.
Well, yeah, the examined life is the only life worth living. I mean, but I don't know what's happened to the liberal arts and the idea that there can be people who are interested in things for something other than whether it brings a return. That's the only thing. I don't know. But these are. Let me ask you. You've been at this for 4 years. I've been looking at this question for 22 years. I'm interested in the idea of expanding the ownership of the technology. Mr. Kelso, ESOPs, that they begin to expand the ownership of the capital instruments so that people ultimately can be having an other source of income, which is the owning of the robots, that making the production, and as much possible displace people to the degree we possibly can in the mass production process, so they'd have income and then be able to lead a free life. That's my view of it. I've been looking at it for a long time, but that's an unusual view. But what did you think personally, having been at it for 4 good long years, really seriously looking at this thing, and from a very pragmatic perspective and so forth? Think of the series that the Times just put together these last couple of weeks ago.
Which is going to be a book.
Yeah, they're going to turn it into a book. Talk a little bit about it. You must have been pleased to see that, I guess.
I was pleased to see some of it. Yes, that they did address the problem. The only thing they didn't address was job creation. Minor detail. Where are these jobs going to come from? How are they going to develop? Where are they going to develop?
I would
what
bring
areas?
up the question of should they?
Should they develop? We can ask all of it. We can also address an issue that we haven't addressed. What's really driving these companies to downsize and to restructure? The quarterly annual and the annual report.
But
which
it
is
always
the stock
has.
price.
But it always has, hasn't it? That's the responsibility of the stockholders.
Okay, what happened is now in some of these companies, 60% of the stock is owned by institutions. Mutual funds, pension funds.
Right. Yeah, that'll ripple through the economy.
In the old days, you could sell your stock. You didn't like the earnings, you'd sell the stock. If 60% ownership, a little difficult to sell without creating some sort of catastrophic market gyrations.
Right, okay.
So they are influencing these companies and forcing them to toe the line and to restructure. That's what's causing a lot of this.
And international competition, do you think?
International competition, absolutely. We also have different labor laws here than they do in Europe. In some countries, they have to notify them a year in advance that they're going to lay them off. Here, it can be 2 minutes. And don't let the door hit you. It's very different, and that's why in a lot of these countries, they're reluctant to hire. You're looking at a 22% unemployment rate in Spain.
Yeah, Spain is high. Yeah, they get 12 in France. They've had these unconscionably high rates.
Almost 12 in Germany. And Italy, they wouldn't dare lay off, so they say. Who knows? But it's a
Too
global...
many wild people running through the streets with big knives.
Maybe. But it's a global marketplace. And
well,
that's
it
what's
is true that this thing, even though we mentioned Mr. Buchanan, there's a certain question where they'll ship overseas their jobs and that sort of thing, and then to a certain point, it's going to become politically volatile, and that issue is going to raise. And how much can the folks? And particularly now it's moving into the middle classes, as you say. Well, and then you got a whole group of people. You had 1 million men marched in the name of, with Mr. Farrakhan and others down to Washington. They're talking about social justice. You get 1 million here, you get the women, you get 1 million here, you get 1 million there, 1 million there. Pretty soon you got a movement going.
Yes,
right?
But look what also is happening in other parts of the world. Japan, which did not lay off people. They're doing it.
They're starting now also?
Well, not only that. This is in 1994, a year and a half ago. Nikkei Business Publications as part of this 11-page cover story in Japanese.
Hold it up. Oh, it's in Japanese, so maybe we can put it, where are we going to put it? I'll put it on this camera, 3. Okay. So this is in Japanese, and what do it say?
It's talking about the downsizing in America.
Oh, I see.
Why did they came and featured WorkTalk.
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
All right.
And I can show you they even translated the name WorkTalk into Japanese.
Oh, Japanese.
But why did they come?
Why?
Because we're a perfect example of what's going on and a remedy to the solution. Because we provide a place where people can come, hear cutting-edge information, pick up literature, see job postings, find out what's going on in the world, network.
Is this? I'm trying. Is this where it says WorkTalk, where my finger is?
WorkTalk is right here in Japanese.
Show me. Where's
right
WorkTalk?
Here.
Where? I can't see. Hold it. Hold your finger on WorkTalk. Can you, Miriam?
Yeah.
No, where?
It is. It's down below. It's on the bottom.
Well, where's your finger?
Right there.
Oh, there. Oh, I see over there. That's WorkTalk in Japanese?
Yes, that's WorkTalk in Japanese.
There's WorkTalk in Japanese. You saw it here first. Okay. On cable television,
And a couple of weeks ago...
but are they starting to do this downsizing in Japan now, too? And so that because they prided themselves on...
full employment, we never lay off.
Yeah, right. So it's an international virus.
Absolutely. And what I hear is that 1 out of 2 female college graduates in June will not find a job. That's pretty startling in Japan.
Right.
And a couple of weeks ago, Japan Television came to WorkTalk to film and to interview some of our people to see what's going on here. But it's a problem that they definitely have.
Well, the country's beginning to look at it. They're catching up with the interest that you've had at WorkTalk on your own. You've been researching this stuff. Are you pleased that people are starting to pick up on that finally? And are you beginning to get some support? Have you felt like Mr. Perry at the South Pole there for a while, going across,
Well, that doesn't bother me.
But I
was always a pioneer. So
relish that sort of thing anyway.
No, I believe in helping people. I always have.
Yeah.
And if there's pain, you got to help them. You got to go out there, do what you can, no matter how small a part. There are support groups in Fairfield County, for example, over 50 in Bergen County or more.
Yeah.
They're different.
Yeah.
They're generally people sit around and either trade war stories or something like that.
Yeah.
But we're very different. We're inspirational, motivational.
Yeah.
So that when you come to WorkTalk and leave, you will feel better for having gone there.
Yeah, and you might get a lead to help you out.
Absolutely.
You're pragmatically oriented.
Yes.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Would you say you're more, is it a question of pragmatic? I mean, you have a specific problem, you want to solve the problem and everything like that. Is there a distinction between, in this attitude toward this question, a distinction to be drawn, and is it important, a distinction to be drawn between a pragmatic approach that can be very pragmatic and very, right to the point of solving the problem by next Tuesday for Mr. X, Mr. Y, Miss Z, and so forth like that, and a philosophical one? And do they ever get in the way? And is it a law? Are there people who are thinking 50 years out?
No.
Or do we have people who are thinking generationally out?
No.
And is there a clash, to the degree that people do begin to think about that, between the pragmatic solution and the long-term solution, and is it perhaps the long-term solution seems on the surface of it very impractical at the initial stage because it's not dealing with the problem by next Tuesday.
I don't think.
And do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yes.
And are there philosophers in your view who are looking at this thing long term? Because 50 years will come faster than we know, and these changes are going so fast.
Absolutely. But
and isn't there some place or need for that kind of responsibility among our political leadership and so forth?
Sure, there's a need, but that doesn't mean it's happening. They're not doing it. They're not addressing it. They're not even addressing the current needs. And this is a real problem.
Well, I guess the point I'm trying to make, can there be a distinction between what's current, you can address the current need, but the current need may be only leading to a problem that in the long term is going to make things worse?
Perhaps.
Sometimes. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
You've got to look at the concept of the new contract of work with an employee-employer. It's what value you add. WIIFM is the most listened to station of all. It's what's in it for me. It's the value you bring to the table, what you add. That's what the employer is looking at. And that's what's counting out there. And you look at a recent college graduate, he's got to look at 8 to 10 careers over a lifetime, which means 2 to 5 years maximum. If you've been in a job more than 5 years, watch out.
And the jobs, I wonder if jobs are becoming more fulfilling or not, or if the context where there's so much backbiting, there's so much competition, there's so much looking over your shoulder and everything. If the job place itself is not becoming a place that is grinding up, in very many cases, the human soul. If much of the alienation of the human family in that is that the whole process itself is just grinding up a good human relationship in the longer term sense of where we used to have a sense of community and these kind of things. It's gone, and these values, these really important values, are being lost in this very economic process.
Look at the violence that's come into the workplace. Guns that have come into the workplace.
Yeah, they're in the schools, grade schools, yeah.
We never thought of things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very different society. It's a different way. It's evolved differently. Look at the influence of television. Look at the influence of the media. Well,
now, couldn't some of these things, couldn't the media, here, you're on media, yeah, and, this is the beginning of a, okay, but this is like work talk, right? And it's not oriented to the market. This is not here to make a buck, right? This is here, do you understand what I'm saying? Work talk is not. And if it were, I wonder if it would be able to serve the same sort of purpose if it were. This might be called very impractical to be working in a context where it is not oriented toward the market. Do you understand? Now, that would be an example of something, but in the long term, it might be out of a context where things are being discussed in a different kind of way than bottom line, monetized human relationships. It might be from those places that the solutions might come. I mean, even our academic communities are politicized beyond belief. They have these infighting going on between them in the publishing world, infighting going on, and all of these things about, do you understand what I'm trying to get at here, Mary? You understand?
Absolutely.
That the answers might come out of places, odd places,
That's right.
where the human spirit is flowering or at least finding root in a dark world.
I look at Work Talk. We're the only group like it in all of New York City. Why? There should be others. People have come and they've seen what we do. One person said, well, why should we reinvent the wheel? You've got it. Did they do anything? No. Others have come. They'll fall by the wayside. They're inconsistent. Well,
Commander Perry, I would predict, as you meet here at the South Pole, or North Pole, wasn't it? Yeah, the North Pole, that the work that you've done, you pioneer, congratulate you very much on it. And again, say it real quick here, where it is. You meet every Tuesday night.
It's Work Talk. We meet every single Tuesday, no matter what the weather is. In a blizzard,
rain or shine.
People come.
They came through the blizzard.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
Quick.
We're running out of time.
We're on East 76th Street, the hall beneath the Church of St. Jean Baptiste. The doors open at 6 o'clock. We advise people to get there then. We even serve coffee and tea. We have lots of tables of literature, job postings.
All welcome.
And everyone is welcome, all ages, all professions, all levels.
Even sociologists who are looking at the problem are perfectly comfortable. They can come.
Sure, absolutely.
Right. Anybody can come at all to it, right?
It's open to everyone. We're a charity.
All right. I'm happy to have been able to bring you those perceptions. Wish you all the very best. Congratulations on having do it, and may it flourish and set a pattern for many other people around the country who are helping people in a difficult situation cope with a difficult situation, try and answer it. And also, some of the people who are not in that middle class group can also come and may there just spawn a whole lot of people where they can begin to address this and may then also enter into the dialogue of our national media, because I think it should be coming up more and more a tete-a-tete on these questions, and I, for one, would like to see it discussed philosophically, and we did some of that here, and I certainly congratulate you on the work, and thank you very much for participating in the conversation.
And I thank you for providing this forum.
Not at all. Your pleasure to have the perception, Marian
Karpen.
Marian Karpen. Okay. Work Talk. Thank you for viewing. We invite you to tune in. We'll be coming back again, Marian. Thank you for coming in very much, and all the best to you in your good work.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you next week, and look forward to seeing you at that time.
Am I supposed to?
No, you just stay here. No, just sit.
Harold, we're clear, but could we just stay and talk for a while, get some reaction shots?
Okay. Okay, you better do it quick. Okay, you might want to put them on that separate tape, Alan. You see a little 10-minute tape there? That went pretty well. You got anything you can leave with me? Like
I can
this,
leave
huh?
you that. We're on internet.
Okay.
We've been featured in the Daily News, publications in Rome. This is us.